from the Independence Party, Tom Horner. And from the Independence Party, Rob Hahn. Our first question is going to come from Kevin Paap, President of the Minnesota Farm Bureau Federation, and our first respondent will be Mark Davis.
Animal rights organizations are working hard on a state-by-state basis to restrict the way farmers and ranchers raise our livestock. What will you do, and please be specific, if one of these organizations brings forth an initiative to limit the way we raise our livestock in Minnesota?
Well, I strongly support the production of livestock in Minnesota. My great-grandfather down in Nobles County raised livestock as well as being a banker, and my grandfather raised Guernsey cows in western Hennepin County back when that was farmland. So I would oppose anything that would restrict the ability of Minnesota hog, cattle, dairy producers to raise their and house their livestock in accordance with proper environmental protections. That's certainly been an issue with some of the large feedlot lagoon operations, and I think MPC has made some progress in catching up. The county's catching up to that, so we want to do those kind of standards to protect our citizenry and protect the people on century farms who happen to be downwind from some of those operations. But I certainly would not be restricting the ability of those farmers to make a good living through their enterprises.
Margaret Anderson Keller.
Well, I'm a strong supporter of production agriculture in this state. I came from production agriculture. I grew up on a small 70-cow dairy farm in the Minnesota River Valley in Blue Earth County, Judson Township, and I know that farmers and ranchers care for their animals. Their animals are their way of life. So we cannot have further restrictions on the way of life to make sure that we can have good, strong production agriculture in the state. The rules are working right now. There's very serious violations. There are closures of those facilities. And so I would not support, as governor, any further restriction on animal production, livestock in the state of Minnesota. I'd make sure we fight against that. And actually, I think one of the good things here is we're not an initiative and referendum state on this issue. And that's the way a lot of these things have been passed in other states. We can't have that happen here. I do not support initiative and referendum. We need to keep a strong production livestock industry right here in Minnesota.
Tom Horner.
Well, animal agriculture is very, very important to Minnesota, and it doesn't succeed if it isn't environmentally responsible, if it isn't engaged in the humane practice of raising animals. So we need to make sure that we're allowing farmers to farm, ranchers to ranch, that we get out of the way, get bureaucracy out of the way, and allow agriculture to do what it does best. I think particularly when we get to these kinds of areas of regulatory burden, it really is important to let the local community take the lead. I think that's where we really need to put our faith is what's happening with the local governments, how do they see the opportunities to manage this, working in cooperation with farmers, with ranchers, and making sure that we're deriving full value from this important part of agriculture.
Tom Emmer.
Thanks, Kevin. I thought the question was, what if an animal rights organization tries to bring forward some legislation that would be a further regulation on our farmers in terms of on our livestock operations, telling them, for instance, how to handle their animals, how to house their animals, how to take care of their animals. I would oppose that. I think when you look at regulation, and one of my colleagues just said the rules are working, that's not what I'm hearing all over the state. It's important to have some regulation. I think farmers need to understand that government is there to help them, not to frustrate their ability to farm. And in this case, it seems to me that some of the agenda items that different groups are promoting as animal rights fly directly in the face of what our farmers are trying to do, which is produce the food that we all eat. So I would be opposed to it, but again, we'd have to read it. We have to know what it says first.
Matt Intenza.
I think when you know production agriculture, you know that that problem doesn't exist, because the agriculture producers that we have in the state, our farmers, understand that if you mistreat your animals, if you're not taking care of them, you're going to lose productivity. And so I would veto such legislation. You know, my family came out here to Minnesota 150 years ago. My great-great-grandfather was a veteran of the Civil War. They farmed out in Pearl County. Like a lot of families, we lost our farm during the Depression and then wound up down by Rushmore near Worthington, Minnesota, and that's where I grew up. I put myself through college and saved money in high school by working, doing farm work, and by working minimum wage jobs. My wife is from down the road here in Marshall, and so you can know that as governor, I understand how agriculture works. I've got lots of family that are still farming, and you're going to have a governor who's going to stand up for you.
Rob Hahn.
If an animal rights group would come to me, I would adhere to my open door policy and give them about 15 seconds and then tell them to focus their efforts on a different state. I think what we have right now in this state, by and large, is very good, and I think the farmers need to operate, obviously within regulations that have been established, but need to operate as they are right now, freely to do what they need to do. I don't think there's a place right now for animal rights activists